Look, I've been watching horror movies for 20 years now, and I'm convinced most of us have forgotten what actual fear feels like. We sit through movies that rely on loud noises and jump scares, and then call them terrifying, while our heart rates never even change. But what if I told you that there are some movies out there that will remind you of why you used to check under your bed as a kid? These aren't the movies everyone's gonna talk about, but they're the ones that make me question walking alone at night. As a guy who's seen thousands of horror movies, these are the horror movies that are actually scary. So let's start with Green Room, because this movie is basically a masterclass in making you physically uncomfortable for 90 minutes, and I mean that in the best way possible. Here's the thing about Green Room. Most horror movies try to scare you with ghosts or demons or whatever supernatural bullshit is trending this year. This movie just locks a punk band in a room with neo-Nazis and lets human nature do the rest. There is no special effects. No special effects are needed when you've got ideology and machetes. The setup sounds almost boring when you say it out loud. A broke punk band called The Ain't Rights, really clever there, takes a gig at this sketchy club in rural Oregon. They witness a murder, get trapped in the green room. Oh my God, he said it! He said the name! And now the skinheads want them dead. That's it. That's the whole movie. But somehow this simple premise becomes more terrifying than any haunted house or possessed doll you've ever seen. What makes this so scary is how real everything feels. These aren't action heroes or final girls who know exactly what to do. They're just kids who thought they were tough because they play loud music and have strong opinions about fascists. But when actual violence shows up, they fall apart immediately. One guy tries to escape through a window and gets hacked to death with a machete before he even hits the ground. There's no dramatic last words, no heroic sacrifice, just brutal reality. And the neo-Nazis aren't cartoon villains either. Patrick Stewart plays their leader, Darcy, and he's terrifyingly calm about the whole situation. He's not screaming about racial purity or frothing at the mouth. He's just a businessman running a drug operation who needs to eliminate some witnesses. The horror comes from how practical and organized their evil is. They're planning to stage the whole thing as an accident, complete with fake evidence and alibis. The movie literally traps you in that room with them. The walls feel like they're closing in, the fluorescent lights keep getting knocked out, and every sound from outside could mean death is coming through the door. By the end, you're as paranoid and desperate as the characters. Your fight or flight response kicks in just from watching other people be terrified. Wait, I'd like to take a moment to talk about today's video's sponsor, Manta Sleep. Look, after watching some of these horror movies, you're probably gonna have some trouble sleeping anyways, but at least with Manta Sleep's mask, you can block out all that extra daylight that's messing with your head. This thing is actually adjustable, which means it fits your face instead of just sitting there doing nothing. The pro nap movement is real, people. Quality sleep shouldn't be this hard to figure out, but here we are, and Manta Sleep figured it out. Head to Manta Sleep's website with the link in the description and use my code CHUPA for 10% off. Trust me, after the next movies we're going to talk about, you're going to need all the help falling asleep you can get. And now that you've got your sleep fixed, let's talk about why you should never trust strangers. Creep is the reason I don't answer Craigslist ads anymore, and honestly, that's probably a good life choice regardless of whether you've seen this movie or not. The whole thing starts so simple, it's almost stupid. A videographer named Aaron answers an ad from some guy named Joseph who claims he's dying of brain cancer. Joseph wants to make a video for his unborn kid. Sweet, right? It's heartwarming. This is the type of job that makes you feel good about helping people. Except there was one little detail Joseph forgot to mention. He's batshit insane. Here's the genius part though. You don't know that at first, and neither does Aaron. Joseph seems weird, sure. He's a little too friendly and gets a bit too personal, tells stories that don't quite add up, but he's supposedly dying, so you give him the benefit of the doubt. Aaron does what any decent person would do. He stays polite. He tries to be understanding. He doesn't want to hurt a dying man's feelings. And that's exactly what Joseph is counting on. Mark Duplass plays Joseph, and he's absolutely perfect at being the worst person alive, and I mean that in the best way possible. He weaponizes awkwardness in ways that should probably be illegal. He jumps out at Aaron wearing this cheap plastic wolf mask, supposedly as a joke, and then he tells increasingly disturbing stories about his father. He gets way too close when he talks. Every single social boundary gets tested and then crossed. The wolf mask thing is brilliant because it starts innocent. He calls it peach fuzz.
Peach fuzz! was?
Says it's for his kid, but as the movie goes on, the mask becomes a symbol of the predator he's been hiding. When he finally puts it on for real, it's not cute anymore. What makes this so effective is how realistic it feels. We've all met people who make us uncomfortable, but we can't quite explain why. They're too eager to share personal stuff. They stand too close. They laugh at their own jokes way too hard. Usually we just avoid them and move on. But what if you couldn't leave? What if you were stuck making a video with them in the middle of nowhere? Aaron keeps trying to give Joseph the benefit of the doubt because that's what good people do. Even when Joseph confesses to horrible things, even when red flags are flying everywhere, Aaron wants to believe there's still something decent in there worth saving. That kindness is what gets him killed. The ending is brutal because it's so preventable. Joseph tricks Aaron into meeting him at a park, supposedly to make amends. Aaron sits on a bench, filming, being the professional videographer until the very end. Joseph walks up behind him with an axe, and that's it. Movie over. But the real horror comes after, when Joseph reviews the footage and explains why Aaron never turned around.
I realized why you didn't turn around. It's because you're the greatest person that's ever lived, Aaron. No matter what I did to you, you believed I was good, and I would do you no harm. And that is why I will always love you, and why you'll always be my favorite, and why you'll always be.
So yeah, Crete proves people can be monsters. But if you didn't know, Australia has actual monsters deep underground. The Tunnel is hands down the best found footage movie you've never heard of. And that's a crime against horror because this movie is so good. This Australian film does everything the Blair Witch Project did well and levels it up. And I love the Blair Witch Project. This movie is just so good. And the problem is that it's criminally underrated to the point where I get personally offended when people haven't seen it. A news crew decides to investigate these abandoned railway tunnels under Sydney because the government won't explain why a major water project got cancelled. Classic setup. Journalists poking around where they shouldn't be. Bureaucrats being sketchy about the whole thing, except this time, there's actually something down there that justifies the cover-up. The documentary format works perfectly because it starts with interviews of two survivors. Right from the beginning, you know half the crew is dead. The tension comes from watching them walk into their doom while cracking jokes and complaining about the smell. Once they're underground, the movie becomes a masterpiece of less is more horror, which is my favorite type. The tunnels are this massive maze of darkness, and their camera lights are the only thing keeping the shadows at bay. Light becomes literally a limited resource. Batteries die, equipment fails, and somewhere in that darkness, something is hunting them. The creature design is genuinely terrifying when you finally see it. Think of every nightmare you had about monsters in your basement as a kid, then make it real and put it in a tunnel system that goes on for miles. It's tall, emaciated, moves wrong, and has these glowing eyes that show up in the darkness like headlights. But the movie's real strength is in what you don't see. Strange sounds get picked up on the audio equipment. An old air raid siren goes off in an abandoned room. The sound guy Tangles gets pulled through a hole in the wall by something strong enough to snap his audio cable. All you hear is the cable whipping through the opening and then silence.
Yo, Tangles!
That scene alone is scarier than most entire horror movies. The tunnel system itself becomes a character. It's not just a setting, it's this living, breathing maze that seems designed to trap people. They find evidence that homeless people used to live down there, but all of their camps are abandoned. Whatever's hunting the crew has been doing this for a while. What really sells the terror is the camera work. Everything's handheld. Everything's shaky, and the night vision gives us this green, ghostly quality to the footage. When something moves in the background, you're not sure if you actually saw it or if it's just your eyes playing tricks. The limited perspective makes every shadow a potential threat. By the time the creature starts actively hunting them, the movie has you completely on edge. Every sound could be death. Every corner could hide something horrible, and the worst part is knowing that two of these people are never making it out alive. The ending leaves you with questions that never get answered. Tangle's body is never found. His family is still looking for him. Sometimes the camera captures things. That doesn't mean you'll ever understand what actually happened down there. So yeah, underground tunnels in Australia are terrifying. But what if a building itself wanted you dead? I'm just gonna say it, grave encounters scared the hell out of me, and that almost never happens to me anymore. I've watched so much horror that I'm basically immune to most scares. Jump scares don't work, creepy music doesn't faze me, ghosts are usually just loud and annoying. This movie broke through all of that and made me genuinely uncomfortable to be alone in my house afterwards. The setup is perfect because it starts as a complete joke. You're watching this fake ghost hunting show where the host, Lance, is obviously a fraud. He's bribing security guards to tell scary stories, using fishing line to move objects. He's just completely full of Sound familiar? Every paranormal reality show ever made follows this exact playbook. So when Lance and his crew get locked in this abandoned psychiatric hospital for the night, you're expecting more of the same fake nonsense. Maybe some manufactured drama for the cameras. Instead, they get the real deal. And for once, it destroys them. The hospital, Collingwood Psychiatric, becomes the main villain. Not the ghosts, not some demon, but the building itself. It starts messing with reality in ways that make you question what's actually happening. They try to leave when morning comes, but the front doors just open into another hallway. Time stops working. Their clocks say it should be daylight, but it stays dark outside forever.
This doesn't make any sense. I checked the sunrise times last night. It should have been bright by 7:45.
This hits different when you know the real history of these types of places. In fact, I actually grew up in a town that used to have one of these psychiatric hospitals. The stories you hear are beyond disturbing. I'm talking lobotomies for 20-year-old women who got moody during their periods, and they would stay there till they were 90. People were locked up for decades because their families didn't want to deal with them. Treatments were basically torture with medical names. In fact, I believe that if ghosts do exist, they'd definitely be haunting these places, and they would be rightfully pissed off. The movie gets progressively more insane as it goes on. The crew starts disappearing one by one. Matt, the surveillance guy, completely loses his mind and starts thinking he's a patient who needs to be cured by the ghosts. When they find him, he's wearing a hospital gown and talking like he's been there for years. But Lance's fate is the real nightmare. He survives longer than everyone else, hiding in the tunnels, eating rats to stay alive. By the time he finds his way to the operating room, he's already broken. Dr. Friedkin, this ghostly surgeon who used to lobotomize the patients, is waiting for him. The last scene shows Lance after his lobotomy. His speech is all slurred and childlike, but he's smiling because now he's cured and can finally go home. Except he's been absorbed into the hospital's collection of permanent residents. He signs off with his old TV catchphrase, but it's completely hollow now.
Lance Preston. Signs off.
The found footage format makes everything worse because you're trapped in their perspective. When the cameras start picking up things the crew can't see, when the night vision reveals figures moving in the background, you feel just as helpless and confused as they do. So yeah, ghosts can drive you insane, but no is in this movie tried to make the dead into soldiers. Overlord takes everything terrible about World War II and somehow makes it worse by adding super zombies. This movie was originally supposed to be part of the Cloverfield universe, which should tell you how weird it's gonna get, but honestly it works better as its own thing because the concept is already insane enough without tying it to giant monsters from outer space. American paratroopers get dropped behind enemy lines on D-Day to take out a radio tower. It's a standard war movie setup, right? Except this radio tower is built on top of a church, and under that church is a secret Nazi lab where German scientists are trying to create immortal super soldiers using some kind of mysterious black tar they found underground. The opening sequence is incredible. These guys are packed into a transport plane getting ready to jump, and German flak starts tearing through the aircraft. Engines explode and people literally get sucked out of holes in the plane. The whole thing becomes a death trap in the sky. It's one of the most realistic and terrifying depictions of aerial combat you'll ever see. Then they land and discover the experiments, and everything goes completely off the rails. The serum the Nazis are using doesn't just bring people back from the dead. It mutates them into these grotesque, twisted versions of themselves. Bodies contort in impossible ways. Limbs stretch and bend wrong. People get stronger, but they also get completely insane and violent. What makes this so disturbing is how grounded it feels in real ideology. These are not cartoon villains. They're scientists who genuinely believe they're creating a master race that will last forever. The fact that their experiment turns people into monsters feels appropriate given how monstrous the already were. The gore is also absolutely brutal and completely practical. There is no CGI blood here. Everything looks wet and real and disgusting. When someone's face gets half blown off by a shotgun, you feel it. When bodies get impaled on meat hooks, it's genuinely hard to watch. But the movie's smartest move is showing that the serum doesn't create heroes, even when the good guys use it. When the Americans try to save their wounded friend Chase by injecting him, he comes back as this violent, mutated thing that they have to put down themselves. Later, when Corporal Ford uses it to survive a mortal wound, he knows he's turning into a monster and sacrifices himself to destroy the lab. The message is pretty clear. The pursuit of becoming superhuman always comes with a cost that makes you less human. Whether you have good intentions or bad ones, some powers corrupt you just by existing. The action sequences are relentless and chaotic. Gunfights in cramped underground tunnels, hand-to-hand combat with reanimated corpses, explosions that bring down entire buildings. It never stops moving long enough for you to catch your breath. By the time they're fighting their way through hordes of Nazi zombie soldiers, you've completely forgotten this started as a World War II movie. It becomes pure survival horror where the stakes are saving the world from an army of immortal fascists. So yeah, Nazi experiments destroy bodies, and that's pretty scary. But trauma can destroy a mind completely. You know how people always say, "It's all in your head, Sonny," to dismiss something scary? Well, Incident in a Ghostland makes that phrase absolutely terrifying. This movie messed me up for weeks. Not because of the gore, though there is plenty of that, and not because of the jump scares or creepy music. It got to me because it shows exactly how the human brain breaks when reality becomes unbearable. Two sisters, Beth and Vera, are attacked in their childhood home by these absolute nightmares of human beings. The big guy, and I can only describe him as the big guy because words don't really work here, is this massive person who acts like a toddler having the world's most violent tantrum. I don't know what it is, but some giant, huge person who acts like an angry baby is just genuinely just terrifying. Maybe I had a bunch of nightmares of like a 6-foot tall man in a diaper chasing after you when I was a kid. Maybe that's why. Anyways, that is just a surface level here though. The real nightmare starts when Beth's mind decides it can't handle what's happening anymore. Cut to 16 years later, Beth is now a successful horror novelist with a loving family, and she gets a call from Vera asking for help. But Beth barely remembers her sister. Her childhood trauma has been buried so deep, it might as well never have happened. She's built this perfect life where the attack was just inspiration for her best-selling novel. Except none of that is real. The twist hits you right in the middle of the movie, not at the end when you'd expect it. Vera breaks through Beth's delusions and reveals that they're still teenagers, still captives, and still being tortured by the same monsters from the beginning. 16 years haven't passed. It's been 3 days. Beth's entire successful adult life, her career, her husband, her children, her fancy apartment, all of it was constructed by her mind as an escape from a reality too horrible to endure. The brain is apparently so powerful, it can create entire decades of false memories just to avoid dealing with the present moment. And that's when you realize you've been living inside a trauma victim's disassociation for half the movie. Everything you thought was real was actually a desperate lie her mind was telling itself to survive. The monsters themselves represent something deeper than just random violence. They dress their victims up like dolls, strip away their humanity, and turn them into objects for their twisted games. The house becomes this nightmarish dollhouse where real people are forced to play dress up for psychopaths who never grew up. When Beth finally accepts reality and fights back, she's not just battling her captors. She's battling her own mind's desire to retreat back into the safety of delusion. The hardest part isn't killing the monsters. It's choosing to stay present for the pain instead of escaping into fantasy. The ending leaves you wondering how much of what you just saw was even reliable. Even after the rescue, Beth sees visions that might be real or might be permanent scars on her perception. Once your brain learns to rewrite reality, does it ever really fully stop? So yeah, a broken mind can create false realities, but collective belief can can create actual monsters in our next movie. The Empty Man is what happens when someone finally figures out how to make Lovecraftian horror work in a mainstream movie. Most cosmic horror films try so hard to be weird and incomprehensible that they forget to be scary. They throw tentacles and ancient languages at you and expect that to do all of the work. This movie takes a much smarter approach. It makes the impossible feel logical. Detective James Lasombra is investigating the disappearance of some teenagers who were messing around with this urban legend called the Empty Man. You blow into a bottle on a bridge at night, and 3 days later, you disappear. Simple enough. Sounds like the kind of stupid challenge kids would actually try. But as James digs deeper, he discovers this cult called the Pontifex Institute that's been manipulating reality through something called a talupa. The basic idea is that if enough people believe in something strongly enough and for long enough, that belief becomes real. Thought plus concentration plus time equals flesh. The genius of this concept is how understandable it makes everything. You don't need to understand ancient cosmic forces or read dead languages. You just need to grasp that human belief has power, and when that power gets focused and organized, it can create actual physical entities. The Empty Man itself isn't really a monster in the traditional sense. It's more of a signal, a broadcast from some other dimension that needs a human receiver to manifest in our world. The cult has been engineering these receivers for decades, creating people whose minds are damaged just the right way to pick up the transmission. And here's where the movie absolutely destroys you. James discovers that he's one of these engineered receivers. His entire life, his tragic backstory about losing his wife and son, his career as a detective, even his investigation into the missing teenagers. All of it was constructed by the cult over the span of just 3 days. They willed him into existence specifically to become the new vessel for the Empty Man because their previous receiver was dying. James's memories, his personality, his relationships, everything he believes makes him who he is, it's all fake. It's implanted and designed. The cult explains that trauma makes people better receivers for cosmic horror. Pain and loss tune the human mind to the right frequency, so they gave James the worst possible backstory. Dead family, guilt, isolation, because suffering makes him a more effective antenna for otherworldly signals. This reframes every ghost story and urban legend as potentially real, not because supernatural forces exist, but because human belief is a technology we don't fully understand. Every time people share a scary story, every time they pass along a creepy legend, they're contributing to a collective pool of focused thought that might eventually create the thing they're afraid of. The movie builds this mythology slowly and purposefully. You get 20 minutes of backstory in the mountains of Tibet that establishes how the entity first made contact with humans. You see how the cult operates, how they spread the legend, how they identify and groom potential vessels. By the end, you're not just scared of the Empty Man, you're scared of your own capacity for belief and what that belief might accidentally create in the world. So yeah, cosmic entities mess with reality, but family secrets can cut much deeper in our next movie. Literally nobody I know talks about Cobweb, which is a shame because it is one of the most genuinely terrifying monsters I've seen in years. This movie flew completely under the radar when it came out. Most people have never even heard of it, and the ones who have usually dismiss it as just another generic horror flick. They're wrong. Dead wrong. The monster in this thing will stick with you long after you've forgotten whatever jump scare you saw last week. Peter is this lonely kid whose parents are clearly hiding something terrible. He starts hearing scratching noises in his bedroom wall, then a girl's voice calling for help. His parents, played by Anthony Starr, who is Homelander, and Lizzie Kaplan, insist it's all in his head and punish him for even bringing it up, which is classic gaslighting behavior that makes you want to scream at the screen. Anthony Starr brings that exact same Homelander unsettling energy here. You can tell something's deeply wrong with this guy even when he's trying to be a normal dad. There's this constant tension where you're never sure if he's protecting Peter or planning to hurt him. The voice in the wall claims to be Peter's sister Sarah, who's been trapped there her whole life. She tells Peter that their parents are murderers, that they're planning to kill him next, and that he needs to poison them before they poison him. Peter, being the scared kid who's been lied to his whole life, eventually believes her and follows through. But here's where the movie gets brilliant. Sarah isn't the victim she pretends to be. When Peter finally frees her from the walls, she's this grotesque spider thing with way too many limbs and teeth that belong in a nightmare. She moves wrong, sounds wrong, and immediately starts killing everyone in sight with inhuman strength and speed. The parents weren't the monsters monsters after all. They were trying to protect the world from the real monster they'd been hiding. The creature design is genuinely disturbing. Sarah looks human enough that you can tell she used to be a little girl, but twisted and elongated in ways that make your skin crawl. She scuttles across walls and ceilings. Her movements are too fast and too fluid, and when she opens her mouth, you see rows of shark teeth. The movie leaves it ambiguous whether Sarah was born this way or became this way because of how she was treated. She claims she was always different, but decades of isolation and abuse could definitely turn someone into a monster. Maybe both things are true. Maybe it doesn't matter which came first. Peter ends up surviving and gets adopted by his teacher, but the final shot shows Sarah rising up behind him, whispering that she'll always be with him. Whether that's real or just trauma manifesting as hallucinations doesn't really matter. The damage is done. He killed his parents, freed a monster, and now he has to live with that for the rest of his life. The real horror isn't Sarah's teeth or claws. It's watching a child get manipulated into becoming a killer by someone who claims to love him. Peter goes from victim to murderer because he trusted the wrong voice. And that transformation is more disturbing than any monster could ever be. Ultimately, family monsters can only get so bad, but some evils spread like a virus. When Evil Lurks is hands down the most bleak and disturbing horror movie to come out in recent years. And that's saying something in an era where filmmakers are constantly trying to one-up each other with shock value. This Argentinian film doesn't just push boundaries, it demolishes them completely. It's the kind of movie that makes you question why you watch horror in the first place, then keeps you glued to the screen anyways because it's so effective at what it does. Two brothers discover this grotesquely swollen corpse in the woods that's been infected by some kind of demonic possession. Instead of following the proper containment procedures, which apparently exist in this world, they decide to move the body themselves. Huge mistake. The kind of mistake that dooms not just them, but their entire community. See, in this universe, demonic possession works more like a disease than a supernatural curse. It spreads through contact, through shared spaces, and through broken rules that nobody really understands until it's too late. There are 7 specific rules for containing this evil, and the brothers break almost all of them within the first act. The horror comes from watching everything spiral completely out of control because people can't follow simple instructions. It's like watching a pandemic unfold. Except instead of wearing masks, people need to avoid electric lights and never speak the demon's name. And just like in real life, everyone thinks they know better than the experts. This movie does things that most horror films would never dare attempt. Kids get brutally murdered on screen. A family dog, infected by evil, tears a young girl apart. A possessed woman calmly eats her own child's brain while kidnapping another kid. It's transgressive in ways that make you physically uncomfortable, but it's not just being edgy for shock value. Every horrible moment serves the story. The practical effects are disgustingly realistic. When someone gets hit by a truck, you see every detail of what that actually does to a human body. When the possession takes hold, people don't just act different. They physically transform into these leaking, swollen nightmares that look like they're rotting from the inside out. But the real genius is how it makes human stupidity the true villain. The demonic force is dangerous, sure, but it's contained until people start making selfish, impulsive decisions. Every character who tries to bend the rules or ignore the warnings ends up making everything worse for everyone around them. The brothers aren't heroes on a quest to save the world. They're just 2 guys who screwed up and now have to watch their families pay the price. Their mistakes don't just cost them. They unleash this evil on their entire region, and by the end, there is no stopping it. There is no religious salvation here either. There's no priests or holy water or ancient rituals that can fix everything. The people who deal with this kind of possession are called cleaners, and they follow scientific protocols, not religious rites. It's a godless world where evil is just another biological fact that needs to be managed properly. When Evil Lurks doesn't offer hope or redemption, it just shows you what happens when people refuse to take dangerous situations seriously until it's far too late to matter. Sound familiar? Now, demonic plagues destroy communities, but the scariest evils of all are the ones that lie inside the human mind. This is a messed up movie, just putting that out there right now. Lars von Trier made a movie about a serial killer and somehow convinced me to spend 2.5 hours listening to a psychopath explain why murder is art. I'm still not sure how I feel about that. In the house that Jack built, Jack is telling his life story to someone named Virgil while they descend into hell. Literally. This is not a metaphor or dream sequence. They're actually walking through the underworld while Jack describes 5 incidents from his killing spree. It's structured like a confession, except Jack isn't asking for forgiveness. He's asking for recognition. Matt Dillon plays Jack with this calm, matter-of-fact delivery that makes everything worse. He doesn't scream or foam at the mouth or do any of the theatrical psychopath stuff that you would expect. He just talks about murder the same way other people discuss their hobbies. Casual, professional, proud of his work. The movie forces you to see everything through Jack's eyes, which means his victims are often portrayed as stupid or annoying or somehow deserving what happens to them. That's not the movie's opinion. That is Jack's opinion, but you're trapped in his perspective, so you start unconsciously agreeing with his twisted logic even when you know it's completely wrong. This is what makes it so disturbing. You'll find yourself thinking, well, she kind of was dumb, or maybe he had a point, before catching yourself and realizing you just sympathized with the monster. The movie tricks you into becoming complicit in his crimes just by watching them unfold. Jack has severe OCD that almost gets him caught multiple times. He'll be in the middle of disposing a body and suddenly need to go back to clean something he missed. He returns to crime scenes obsessively, unable to leave well enough alone. It's darkly funny in the most uncomfortable way possible, like watching someone's mental illness actively work against their serial killing career, in a literal way. The victims, unfortunately, are mostly women, and Jack views them with complete contempt. He sees them as materials for his art project rather than human beings. By the end, he's literally building a house out of frozen corpses, arranging bodies like furniture in this weird masterpiece. But Jack isn't presented as some criminal mastermind. He's clumsy, impulsive, and incredibly lucky. His victims often walk right into his traps through their own poor judgment. He gets away with murder not because he's brilliant, but because people around him are careless or dismissive of obvious warning signs. The ending is perfect. After Virgil shows him around hell, Jack tries to climb out on a broken bridge to paradise. His ego convinces him he deserves redemption despite showing zero remorse for anything that he's done. He falls into the deepest pit of hell because even in damnation, he still thinks he's special. Again, and I will stress this, Jack is not some super intelligent man. He just got lucky. Von Trier uses Jack as a stand-in for controversial artists who create shocking work and then act surprised when people find it offensive. Jack's pretentious speeches around architecture and art are clearly meant to mirror criticisms of Von Trier's own weird films. Honestly, if you're gonna watch any of these movies, watch this one, but please be warned, it is seriously messed up. But if you like serial killers, it'll be your thing probably. Honestly, I think mainstream horror had gotten lazy for a decade, and finally we're seeing some good movies. But in the meantime, these are some of the good movies I was able to find that I think are actually pretty scary. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below if you've seen any of these, or if you want me to talk about your favorite movies. Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed watching it, and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. And if you want to watch another one of my videos before you go to bed tonight, watch this one. Hopefully it won't scare you.